folks, to this week's TCL Blackhawks podcast in conjunction with thechecking.line.com. The Checking Line, awesome hockey discussion since 1875. True story. I'm your host, Matt Cephalou, and with me tonight, as always, are members of our TCL Blackhawks writing team, Madeline Stroff.
Hello.
And Maggie Avila.
Hi, everybody.
And we were going to have one of our other writers, Matt Miller, this evening, but unfortunately he was detained by technical difficulties, so he will not be able to join us for tonight, but we will make sure that he is included in the future for other episodes. Our TCL Blackhawks team lead writer, Cheryl, a.k.a. Hockey Broad, and team writer Evan Moore could also not make it this evening, unfortunately, but they will be joining us for future episodes. Remember to tweet us your questions or comments during our broadcast. Our Twitter handle is @TCLBlackhawks. Go ahead and ask us any questions you might have or just general comments about the team, and we'll be happy to address those and talk about them. All right, let's get to it. So the Blackhawks just completed 3 games since our last podcast episode. A 2-1 win against San Jose, and then a 1-0 win versus the Columbus Blue Jackets, followed by the most recent win, a 3-2 overtime win versus Edmonton, which brings their overall record to 16-0-3. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Hooray. So we're going to revisit those games real quickly. Madeline, do you want to give us your overall impressions for the San Jose win for us?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So Friday's 2-1 win over the San Jose Sharks was the third and final scheduled matchup between the Blackhawks and the Sharks. And the Blackhawks took our previous 2 games against the Sharks by 2 or more points. But this third win did more than just complete the sweep. The Blackhawks actually broke the NHL record of 16 games without a regulation loss set by the Anaheim Ducks in their 2006-2007 Stanley Cup winning season. And this night also marked the return of Marian Hossa, who was sitting out for the practice, but then actually came to practice and thank goodness did not miss any games. And after his hit to the head by Jannik Hansen of the Vancouver Canucks. And this night also marked the return of Dan Carcillo, who missed 15 games and has not been seen since the season opener against the LA Kings. And though Crawford was cleared to play for that night, Ray Emery actually got the start. He had some quality saves, and it was almost a scoreless period, but the Sharks' leading goal scorer, Patrick Marleau, was able to sneak one in right under Emery's pad with only 15 seconds left in the first. Then it was Victor Stahlberg who got the equalizer for the Hawks with a shot off Antoni's left pad with only 3 minutes left in the second period. And then it was rookie Brendan Saad who took a bit of a breakaway shorthanded against the Sharks on their power play. And it was just textbook. He went wide, forcing Niemi over to the right. And then Saad took glove side top left, and it was 2-1 Blackhawks, which ended up being the game-winning goal early in the third. Emery made 26 saves on the night, improving his personal record to 7-0, and the Blackhawks PK was gold standard per usual, fending off 10 minutes of shorthanded play. And then while the first period was a bit of a snort, it was fun to watch Coach Quenneville switch up the lines in the second, moving Dan Carcillo, the returning Dan Carcillo, back up to the first line between Marian Hossa and Jonathan Toews, putting his replacement, Brendan Saad, down on the second line with Kane and Boland. But then by the third period and the end of the second, Carcillo was back on the fourth line with Frolik and Kruger. So it was a really fun game to watch and a good win for the Hawks.
All right, awesome recap. Thank you for that. And actually, it seems as though the Sharks have definitely had a lot of struggles against the Hawks so far this season. Obviously, you could make that argument again for a lot of teams since the Hawks haven't lost in regulation yet. But,
They've had a lot of problems, not only against the Blackhawks, but just this month in general. They've lost every game but 2 so far, and they've only got 1 game left, and it's against Detroit. So
Right. So an unfortunate period of play in the last couple weeks for the Sharks.
yeah.
All right, Maggie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your impressions for the Columbus Blue Jackets game?
Okay, the Columbus game, I would say the Blackhawks probably did not play their best in, and that's been the case with this season. But they actually came out with a win, even though they didn't play their best. What happened in this game is Crawford actually got his second shutout of the season. I believe it's his seventh NHL shutout overall. He had not a whole lot of shots. He had 28 saves total, but still. Um, and he was, definitely the superstar of the game. He was the number one star of the game. His record went to 8-0-3. The defense in front of him and the whole overall team played really good team defense, obviously, and the PK was huge because Columbus went 0 for 5 on their power play, and 3 of those were in the third period. We only had 1 goal, which was scored late in the second. Andrew Shaw did it. He was, as usual, hanging around in front of the net. And he got a beautiful backhand feed from behind the net from Bickle, and he scored. That was the only tally in the entire game. And since it happened late in the second, the entire third period, you kind of thought, oh, can they hold on to this 1-goal lead, for the whole game? And last year, I think that's the difference between last year's Hawks team and this year's. Last year's team, I don't know that would have happened. Obviously, they didn't have any shutouts last year. So that's the difference in my mind that, the difference between this year's Hawks team and last year, and the PK was huge. Which is
Awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of been their story so far this year is that PK. I don't know what they did because they haven't had a whole lot of practice time, but that PK has really turned around and saved them.
Then it's obviously proving dividends for their success. So definitely whatever the coaching staff is doing to really boost their special teams this year, it's working. So that's really great to see.
I believe right now they're second. They're second in
Mm-hmm.
the entire NHL. I think only behind Boston on the PK.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. Great. Well, thank you, Maggie, for that recap. Now let's go over the Hawks' overtime win against Edmonton. They won 3-2. Thoughts on this game?
This was an exciting game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I kind of like the Oilers anyway. They remind me of a young version of the Hawks. So it was like they were just playing themselves, but maybe a couple of years behind them.
Yeah. The Oilers were making it really difficult for the Hawks that night.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting about the Edmonton Oilers for me is that you look at their roster and they have so many first-round picks who are, playing all throughout their lineup, and then some nights they struggle to score for whatever reason that happens to be, and I think a big part of that is that they're all still very young. But it is interesting to look at a team like that on paper and try to figure out why they're not more productive. That coupled with the fact that the Hawks have just played really well defensively, I think is what we can discern is how we got to that outcome for that game. But like you said, very exciting 3-2 overtime win, and I believe the goals for that game. Well, obviously Marian Hossa's overtime goal was quite exciting, and a goal that only few players I think could have made. When he was able to find that rebound and slip it past was Hobby Bullen was in net for Edmonton really, really quickly, and I think that's a move that only a few players like Hossa on that team can make. So
I got to give a shout out to Sharpie there because he
that too,
really
yes.
drove the net. I was like, oh my God, is that Jonathan Taves? No, it's Patrick Sharp. Look at him go. So yeah, he really I think they were so focused on him, they just left Marion Hossa there, and you know he's dangerous.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's also good to see that Hossa didn't miss a beat, with his recent injury. Came right back into the lineup and was able to be effective. So
You also got to look at Carcillo that night. I mean, he was on it, just finishing checks, taking shots on goal. He was really aggressive that night.
yeah, and definitely provided the physicality, I think, that helped contribute to that win. Okay, awesome. Well, let us move on to our next order of business. I think we all probably have some thoughts and impressions of rookie Brandon Saad and what he has brought to the lineup. He's played pretty well so far since he's joined the lineup full time, and Madeline, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on his performance so far this year?
I think he's someone that really shouldn't be underrated because he's Ricky. I mean, obviously Coach Quenville's not because he's keeping him up top with Taves and Hossa even after Dan Carcillo's been back. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was after the San Jose win, Coach Todd McLennan for San Jose referred to Saad as a player who, quote, wasn't very dangerous. And the full quote would
Interesting.
the full quote is, I thought we let a player that wasn't very dangerous, not because he's not talented or anything, but a player in a situation that wasn't very dangerous skate into a primary scoring spot without even challenging him. So it's pretty obvious that just because he's a rookie, they didn't keep on him the way they might have a Taves or a Hossa or a Sharp, someone who is out there. And, Brendan Saad's able to take advantage of this in a very unrookie-like way. I mean, again, the play he made, very smart given the situation. He had the one-on-one going into their zone, driving almost on a breakaway, and he fakes, and he takes the shot, and it goes right past him, Nami, and it was beautiful. So I think there's probably a lot of people underestimating him out there, but he's 3-0, no assists yet, so I think we got some good things coming from Brendan Saad, and he'll keep putting the points up there at the right time. So
Absolutely. Maggie, what about you?
I went to the Hawks prospect camp in, I forgot what was in the summer, in June, July, and I noticed that you cannot get that puck away from him. I mean, he just holds on to it and holds on to it, and you cannot get the puck away from him. He is got very good balance, and that shot that he did that Madeline was talking about, oh my God, that was really a shooter's goal.
Yeah,
How he
impressive.
got, how he got it through that little tiny window, I was like, whoa. I mean, so that was really good. I've just been impressed with him, all the way back then. He's like they said, his nickname that they have, the team has for him is Man Child. He is Man Child. I mean, he's just so big and solid in his skates, and you just cannot switch him off the puck.
That does that Absolutely, and I think one advantage that he does have over other rookies is his size, like you mentioned. I think it's kind of unusual for a rookie to come in. I mean, he's only 20 years old, but I think he weighs in at 6'1", 202 pounds, which is bigger.
big guy.
Yeah, bigger on average, I think, for rookies. So I think that definitely helps him. I think his play, for me, reminds me a lot of Jonathan Taves, actually, in that he's very solid on his skates. It looks like he's pretty good along the boards. I don't know if I've seen enough of him in that area to really kind of make that call, but I think that's an area that I could see him definitely excelling in as he matures. So great things from Saad so far this year. I mean, 3 goals in 18 games, pretty good for a rookie, and with his skill set, I think we'll probably see that total. I mean, I expect that we'll see that total increase. So, all right, great. One thing that I wanted to bring up, if you take a look at the last 3 games that the Blackhawks played, the final scores were pretty close and were pretty low-scoring affairs as well. I think what the Blackhawks ended up totaling, let's see, like 6 goals over the last 3 games, if I'm correct. Which, for a team with this much skill and talent, it's not bad, but you kind of expect them to have more offense than that, especially against a club like Columbus Blue Jackets, who maybe defensively are not as sound as other NHL teams. And so it begs the question: is the Blackhawks offense taking a little bit of a dip, despite the fact that they're still winning? So, Madeline, what do you think about that?
I don't know that I think they're taking a dip. I mean, I think if you go back a couple games before that, I think we beat San Jose 4-1. So we're still definitely capable of having those higher scoring games. I definitely think this team has more of a defensive focus now. They're a lot more balanced between the lines, and you don't see as many goals coming from, I mean, from Kane aside, you don't see as many goals coming from the Taves as consistently Hossa. Definitely not Sharp right now, because it's a lot more spread, and you're seeing goals from people like Shaw and like Stahlberg, and they're coming from all across the line. So I think it's taking a little bit more time, and the big guys up top aren't wearing themselves out, and I don't think they're as focused on getting as many goals as possible as their quote of the year is finding ways to win. I think if they can find that way to win without driving themselves mad driving to the net, I think they're going to kind of hold their own and score the goals they need to score without making them these huge separation games. Not to say they're slacking off, but I think they're kind of keeping things and keeping a good pace just because of the way that the season is functioning right now in this tightened schedule. You don't want to wear yourself out for one game where you can blow them out of the water 7-2 if you don't have to.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point. Maggie, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Madeline said. I think they're trying to. They got burned too many times last year with being out of position, and I think they're trying to focus on not giving away, big play to the other team. So they're trying to watch their defensive positioning, and maybe they're sacrificing a little bit on the offensive side. I think poor Patrick Sharp is being stung. I don't know how many posts that guy has hit, or crossbars. I mean, if those start going in, look out, because he must have hit at least a dozen by now. Once he gets on track, I think that'll help too. And surprisingly, Patrick Kane, who isn't really a goal scorer as much as an assist man, he's actually having a great year. So I don't know. I think they're just trying to pay more attention to the defensive responsibilities and maybe sacrificing a little bit on the offense. But as long as they can, stay close to the other teams, I think that and win. I think that's all their focus is.
Absolutely, I think that's definitely a good point, and I think along with that, when you said that they're focusing more on defensive positioning, one thing in addition to that is that even when they do maybe make a mistake in terms of their defensive positioning, their recovery is something, that's been good and has improved greatly from last year. Because I remember watching several games where Duncan Keith would make his famous no look dump pass, and it would lead to chaos, and there were quite a few times where it led to a goal. But this year, when there are mistakes like that, where a fan may see that and go, "Oh, what are you doing? Why did you make that decision?" Maybe a questionable puck decision. The Blackhawks have been able to recover pretty well, and I think part of that's due to the fact that their defense has a little bit better mobility with Johnny Oduya, because he's a very good skater. Obviously, Nick Leddy has always been a good skater, and with his defensive positioning has matured, and so that's definitely added a lot of help to that as well. So,
I actually have a great quote from Crawford from the Columbus game. He said after, and that was a very low-scoring game, it was 1-0. So after that game, Crawford said, quote, "Everyone's had that kind of defensive-minded game. Guys are coming back and helping out our defense, but we're also taking care of the puck and not trying to force too much. That's been a key factor for us." So kind of just all the things we said just kind of wrapped up into that is they know they're being defensively minded and they're being careful out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a good way of looking at it. So, great. Well, those are our last couple topics that we want to discuss. And before we take off here, let's just sort of recap the upcoming games that we've got. There will be 4 games between now and our next podcast for next week. The Checking Line Blackhawks podcast, our next episode will be on Thursday of next week because the Blackhawks play on Wednesday. And so in an effort to not conflict with those, we're going to push forward our next episode for Thursday night at 8 p.m. So it'll be at the same time. The next upcoming game will be at St. Louis, I believe. And have the Blues played? The Blues and the Blackhawks have played already this season, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, because they're obviously in the same division. So.
That was our home game. That was our home opener.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Do we have anything specific that we should look for with that?
Yes, they don't want to go. They don't want to get. Their PK is going to get tested because I believe the Blues are number 1 on the power play.
Which is interesting.
Yes, because they're a defensive team.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, okay. So, any other thoughts about that?
It'll be a good test to see, our PK against their number 1 power play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a battle of the special teams.
Battle of the special teams there.
I'm excited because we're seeing all these teams again.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's our second against St. Louis, our third against Columbus, second against Detroit, which I think is a day game, and then our second against Minnesota.
Yeah, but the first one is early. Is it national? Must be a national.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I would assume so. Great. Well, so yeah, as we said before, a lot of great division matchups coming up in the next week. It should make for some great hockey. Like we said before, battle of the special teams with a couple of those games. So we expect that everybody will be tuning in and excited to see it. Well, that's all the time that we have for tonight's episode. Thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm Matt Cephalou with 2 of our Blackhawks, the Checking Line writers, Madeline and Maggie. We will have our other writers featured on our episodes in the future. But again, thanks again for tuning in. Follow us on Twitter at TCL Blackhawks, and we will see you next time. Thanks a lot. Have a good night.